Yes. Yeah, we can start.
So then I may welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining our event today as a kickoff to our first study program on nuclear safety and arms control. This is joining you show us your interest on this event, and we are very grateful to it. My name is Claudia Crawford. I head the Office of the Multilateral Dialogue, the Conrad Adenauer Foundation here in Vienna. You may know already the Conrad Adenauer Foundation and what we are doing, so I can rather be brief in introduction. We are a German organization. We work in Germany, of course, but we work all over the world in more than 120 countries. We have more than 19 offices. And here in Vienna, we work for more than 2 years now. And of course, being here in Vienna, where we have so many multilateral institutions, there is no wonder why we are here. Our aim is to strengthen and to support value-based multilateralism. And of course, this supporting multilateralism, this also means to look at arms control, since this is mostly based on multilateralism. And there are many important institutions based here in Vienna. And that's why this is a huge part of our program. And with this, I hand over to Brigitte Krech.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Hello to everybody. It's really a great pleasure meeting you here today at our kickoff meeting. Brigitte Krech. I work as policy advisor at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation here in Vienna since November last year. And by training, I'm a geographer. And throughout the year, I will take care of the smooth running of this study program. And maybe, if you have any questions throughout the year, please don't hesitate to contact me. And allow me to add a personal note. If I'm very excited about this program, and if I were a bit younger, I would definitely apply. So all the best to you, and I will pass the floor to Peter. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the start of this series of seminars. First of all, I want to thank the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and Claudia Crawford for this process possible. And I wanted to pay special thanks to Brigitte Krech, who is a great supporter. We're going to kick off in a minute, but first of all, just a few words. Double check that your name appears as it should be on your screen. Rename it if it doesn't. This session is being recorded. There will be a link to Facebook, and so there will be opportunities to catch up afterwards. Okay, I'm Peter Rickwood. I'm a former journalist and an ex-press officer in the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. Now, both those organizations are based in Vienna, and that's why this little organization, Atomic Reporters, is also based here. Atomic Reporters was founded to help journalists bridge the gap in knowledge about splitting the atom, namely fission, and the uses from its chain reaction. We're a non-partisan, not-for-profit organization, and we broker information. And we organize events such as these seminars to satisfy curiosity, to serve interest, as I said, to close gaps. And because of growing interest in the subject among young people, particularly many of the members of the Test Ban Treaty Organization's youth group, we've been providing citizen journalism training And it's based on some of those techniques that you're going to be privy to the seminar series that are being provided. Fission, for better or worse, has changed our world since its discovery 80 years ago. But it's a subject as unfamiliar to most of us, not only journalists, as the surface features of a distant planet wrapped in vapor. There were 60 participants who signed up for this event today, so it's an indication of the interest in the subject. And now I want to introduce my Atomic Reporters colleagues, Tarek Rauf, Jorge Dastis, and Alexander Nietzsche will be working closely with you. You heard Brigitte say that, if you need anything, just reach out and we will help you. We're here to serve your interests. So please, Tarek, without further ado.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everyone too. My name is Tarek Rauf. I'm former head of verification and security policy at the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I've been involved with nuclear governance matters for several decades. And I've also taken part, to my great pleasure, in training and education of young diplomats and media people in Vienna, in The Hague, in Geneva, in Hiroshima, Tokyo, Monterey, pretty much all over the place. So I'm very pleased to be joining this program. To add to what Peter said, since this is an online meeting, we would request everyone to please keep their video on and to have their real face and real name showing, because we also need to see when later on people are asking questions. And also there will be some screenshots taken, and since being an online meeting, it would be best if everyone can see each other. I will be saying a little bit more about the course in a few minutes, so I would now like to pass on to my Atomic Reporters colleague, Jorge Dastis.
Thank you, Tarek. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this kickoff meeting for a very special study program that we're working on. My name is Jorge Dastis. I work for Atomic Reporters, and I'm a journalist from Spain. And before I came to Vienna to work for Atomic Reporters, I worked for several media organizations in Spain, such as the Madrid's public radio and also the newspaper ABC. And then finally, I did an internship in the Vienna Bureau of the Spanish News Agency, which is where I met Peter and the rest of the Atomic Reporters team. And while I was there, I did a lot of stories about science, a lot of stories about the nuclear issue as well. And I got really interested in the topic. And so for Atomic Reporters, I've only been working with them for a very short time, but we've already put together a citizen journalism training workshop that has allowed me to explore those topics that I'm really interested in. And it is what I hope to bring to the table during these seminars. So now I'll give the floor to my colleague, Alex Nietzsche, who will tell us about himself a bit more.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alexander Nietzsche. I have been working with Atomic Reporters for the last 5 years. I'd like to also welcome you to this program, in particular those from the Testament Treaty Organization's youth group, with whom we've been working for the last month or so on a similar seminar program. I have my roots, just like Peter, in journalism and like Jorge. But like him, I've worked for several years at the International Atomic Energy Agency and previously in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe here in Vienna, which is where I've joined also Atomic Reporters in the end. I have been particularly encouraged by the participation of young people in the study program that I just mentioned, and I do hope that the seminar series that Atomic Reporters and the Conrad Stiftung together are offering in the second half of this year and the first half of next year, culminating in this study visit to Vienna in summer 2022, will be a full success and will find your interest. It will go over a great different aspects of the nuclear portfolio. And as Peter and Tarek said, many of these aspects are not covered by the news media in sufficient breadth and depth anymore, unlike in the more remote past. So before I move on to a second part of the program, which is our icebreaker, I wanted to also just add to Peter's statement that this broadcast is also broadcast live on YouTube through the Conrad Stiftung Multilateral Dialogues YouTube page. which is accessible also through their Facebook page, just so you're aware. And without further going into any more details, I'd like to ask you if you would please join me in a little poll through the Mentimeter tool, which you probably all have, or many of you may have already experienced. You're being asked on a shared screen a few questions. It's only 2 slides, so it's not very onerous. And we just thought it would be good to show us and to you where we are all coming from and what our interest areas are. So I'm sending in the chat now the link to you, so you can just click on that and open up your browser, and I'll share my screen in the meantime. Here's the link. And here's the screen. So I see already Berlin is very popular, very well represented. Germany and Austria so far, but also in the UK we have visitors. Monterey. Good morning to Monterey. That's very interesting. I'll leave this open for a while. This is interesting. South Africa, Prague. So still a little bit Europe heavy, but we see that it's broadening out. Islamabad, I can see. New Delhi. Okay. It's moving a little bit more still. St. Petersburg, Potsdam, Shrewsbury in the UK, Görlitz, Pretoria. Okay. It's moving again. And Vienna seems to be the most prominent. Okay. So, oh, still a little bit more. Sukhumi, South Africa. Okay, if it's not moving any further, then I thank you very much for your contribution to this slide, and I move to the next slide, which is of course an interest to all of us to see why you have joined. So is it nuclear energy that interests you, or nuclear diplomacy, science and technology? You can choose all or any or none. Of course, none is not very useful, but we'd be interested to see what sort of combination of interests have brought you to this course, so that we can also gauge a little bit the emphasis that we will place in the study program later in the year. Health applications, I see, is not as represented as we thought. We're talking in particular, of course, about the use of nuclear applications in cancer control and diagnosis. That is one particular aspect that is probably known to many of us, not to mention the rather banal X-ray. Okay. So thank you very much. We'll screenshot this and make this available also later through our websites. So you can always go back to this. So thanks very much for contributing, and I'll stop my screen share. And with this, I hand back over to Claudia, who will say a little bit more about the study program. Claudia, you are on mute.
Even after a year corona, there's still the same mistakes and forgetting to unmute. Yeah, thank you for participating in this little poll. It gives us a better understanding from where you come from and in which area your interest leads most. Why we came up with this idea for this study program? Peter and I, we know each other for a while. And when I started my work here in Vienna, by the way, coming from Moscow, where I worked for the Konrad Arnold Foundation almost 6 years before that in London. And in all these places, I was focusing on security issues. So when I moved to Vienna, Peter and I, we met and talked about possible collaboration. And it came very fast clear what is really needed. Peter said, you know, it's very difficult for journalists to get knowledge about topics related to nuclear, which just come up and they have to write very quick. And for myself, I experienced to meet young security experts who want to become professionals in this sphere. But when you ask what is CTBTO, then they looked at you and said, sorry, can you repeat, please? Well, that means that there is a knowledge lack, especially in the sphere of nuclear arms controls, of all the treaties which were given place in the former times. And since that for years, it was not that high topic on the agenda. Those knowledge disappeared. But as we see everywhere, that the situation around our globe is not becoming more secure and more relaxed, it is very important that people are aware of the whole topic of nuclear, either in the civil world, but of course also in the military world. And it's very important to know, are there treaties in place? Is there a chance for transparency? What is the current stage of this? And that's why Atomic Reporter and Konrad Adenauer Foundation came up with this study program for young experts to get them involved, to get them interested in this topic and to learn more. And if you look at the setting of this program, you will find out there are two major goals we would like to achieve. First of all, of course, is providing knowledge, is information, that you get known the treaties who were in place, who are in place, the challenges which lie ahead and we have to take care of. The second main goal is that we create networking. It was very important to me to invite young experts from all over the world, from at least the area where the OSCE is at home, to get young specialists in journalism, in diplomacy, in technical fields, in international relationship, into these topics and meet from different angles and from different countries to exchange their views, to exchange their ideas, to discuss, and create long-standing relationship. I mean, those of you who will finally participate in this program will meet several times, we have several seminars, and finally we will meet here all together in Vienna, and you will have time enough to get to know each other. And we also plan in the future to have kind of alumni network to bring you in contact on a regular basis, just to being able to create those networks which can play a major role afterwards when you have positions, when you have to make decisions, and then you can say, I know somebody there or in this country, which is at the moment very important, and you can go in contact to each other. So these major goals, two major goals we would like to achieve, and that you know much more, a bit more, what will be the content of the seminars, how will be the procedure, are there people who can help you or you can contact. This will Tarek tell to you, that I will hand over to Tarek now. Please, Tarek.
Tarek, you're muted also.
So thank you very much, Claudia. Hello and welcome to everyone again. I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you online over the next few months and going on this journey together in discovering the legacy of the atom. So I would now like to take a few minutes to provide further information on the study and essay program. By the end of this course, you should have acquired deeper knowledge about nuclear science and technology and its pivotal role since 1945, nuclear arms control and today's ongoing challenges, as well as nuclear diplomacy, what works, what doesn't work, and what are some of the challenges and problems. So we have established a number of timelines, which you would have seen in the original notification that you got. But just to remind you, this, of course, is our launch meeting today on the 7th of July. We have a deadline for the submission of essays, about which I will inform you in a minute or so. And the deadline for the submission of essays is the 31st of August, midnight Vienna time. Based on the essays that will be submitted, we shall select 25 successful participants whom we hope to inform by early October, who would then take part in the program and then would come to Vienna in June next year. And again, I will say a few more words about that. Now, in addition to this, we also have online seminars, as was indicated to you by Alexander. The exact dates will be provided shortly. So we have the launch online seminar in October. This will cover the basics of nuclear technology, that is history, institutions, agreements, treaties, and applications. The next one will be the following month in November, which will dive a little bit deeper into nuclear energy, the related technology, the main players, the positions, nuclear safeguards and verification, as well as nuclear safety and nuclear security. Then the last seminar for this year will be in December, and this will cover nuclear applications, how nuclear technologies are used for the betterment of humankind. And there are many areas, including human health, animal health, science, research, technology, food and agriculture, zoonotics, nuclear technologies playing a role in the diagnosis of COVID tests, for example. So there are many applications of nuclear technology that take place every day, but are not very well known. Then we will kick off the new year in January with a series of 3 interrelated seminars that will discuss the relationship between nuclear technology and its military uses. So the first one in January will cover the history of the evolution of military nuclear technology or nuclear proliferation. What are the key treaties? Which ones succeeded? Which ones failed? Who are the main players? And then the next one will be in March. We are jumping the month because in the meantime, in Vienna, there will be the first meeting of the parties to the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And then there will be very likely the postponed non-proliferation treaty review conference from the middle of January to the middle of February, and a number of us would be involved with that. So the seminar in March will be the second part, and there we will look at the nuclear deterrence, the so-called third nuclear age, new technologies that are coming into play, and so on. And then in May will be the last of the seminars, which will again look at the key state of nuclear affairs, nuclear arms control and disarmament technologies, disruptive technologies, geopolitics, and future threats. Now, for each of these 6 seminars, we will have online learning modules that will be set up that will provide readings and other background resource information for the content for each of the seminars, and will also be of help to you in writing your essays. And then, as I mentioned, this will all culminate in the dialogue program, where you will visit Vienna for 4 days in June. And we will take you to the major international organizations here and also show you the technology that is in use in their laboratories. Now, with regard to the essay competition, this is a key part of this program. So everyone who would like to participate in the study program and the Vienna dialogue program shall be required to write and submit an original essay in the English language of between 800 to 2,000 words on a nuclear topic of your choice from the issues that we will be covering in the seminars. Essays should be written by one person, must be an original work, and must be unpublished. And participants are strongly advised to take care to avoid any indication of any plagiarism. And also co-authored papers would not be accepted. So for example, in the essay, you could focus on why, for example, the selected topic is of importance, especially for younger people, elements related to the historical age of nuclear weapons and developments, the various uses of nuclear technology, especially peaceful, their use today and tomorrow, especially with regard to climate change and meeting sustainable development goals. What is the future of nuclear deterrence and arms control? how to resume the dialogue that at the moment is broken between the nuclear armed states amongst themselves, and also between the nuclear weapon states and the non-nuclear weapon states, to come back to the negotiating table, how to promote, very importantly, public interest in nuclear safety and nuclear security, and also general public interest in arms control, as well as related topics that I have not covered here. So when you're submitting your essay, please also include a CV, a curriculum vitae, a short motivation letter describing your interest in the program, and your full contact details. And this should be sent by email to the Conrad Adenauer Stiftung office in Vienna, and the address is info.vienna@kas.de. And in the subject line, please include application, full name, Arms Control Study Program 21-22. As already noted, a maximum of 25 writers will be informed in early October, and they will participate in the study program. And at the end of the study program, these 25 participants will come to Vienna for the dialogue program in June of next year. And finally, this prospectus does not constitute any legal obligation or liability with regard to any element of the study essay program on the part of the organizers, and all their decisions shall be final and not subject to appeal. So with that, I highly encourage you to take part in the essay writing competition, and those of you who would come to Vienna in June, to see you in person then. So are there any questions with regard to this information on the study program? You can either do it in chat function, or I'm just screening through. If anyone wants to wave their hand, I will see if I can recognize them. And Jorge will help me in that if he would like to. If not, that towards the end, after the presenters have made their presentations, we will have another opportunity. If in the meantime some of these questions come to you, we can address them then. And we are hoping that our presenters will be joining us very shortly or about now. We have a panel of 4 very interesting people.
Tarek,
we have.
Before you move on, there is a question in the chat.
Okay.
There are a couple
Can you
of
read it,
questions,
please?
actually. Yes.
Yeah.
So there is one question from David Bakovsky. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. To what degree is the essay supposed to be academic in style? What are the expectations in terms of referencing an academic style?
Peter, would you like to answer that, please?
We are encouraging you in terms of your expression to reach out to as broad an audience as possible. So while there has to be robustness, accuracy, citations and references in your work, we ask you please to frame it in such a manner that, let me just think, my 14-year-old granddaughter could understand it, okay? So this is basically a premise of journalism. You have to be able to reach as broad an audience as possible. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to seeing how you're going to respond.
Jorge, the next one.
Yes, there's actually a very important question from John Daneman. He says, do those who are not selected also forfeit their copyright upon submission of the paper as outlined in the call for papers?
Alexander or Brigitte or Claudia?
Yeah, I could say something. We see copyright, I know this is a strong word. What we wanted to be sure is that you have written the essay. This is an original text, and that you have done it by yourself. We are not in this way that we would use copyright in the legal terms. Even you are accepted, we would allow you to use other purposes. What we really meant to make sure is that we are allowed, for example, to publish these essays for the 3 best or whatsoever. So maybe this was not well expelled or expressed in the declaration. So don't take it so serious. The copyright, of course, if you are not selected anyway, you can use the text under your personal name.
Okay, all right.
There's another question, and I'm sorry because I'm going to butcher your name, Sheree Janse van Rensburg. She says, how strictly do we need to stick to the topics that you mentioned? I am a civil engineer who used radiation to mitigate biofilm in pipes. Can I talk about something specific like this, or must it be more in line with your program's study focus?
Peter again?
You know, nuclear science and technology is so broad. I think that addressing your area of expertise would most certainly suffice. And again, we're kind of throwing you into a swimming pool without any water in it. You're going to have to do the legwork yourselves, but use what resources you can to assemble your essays.
But Peter, I thought her question was more that she has a very specific expertise in the nuclear field, and could she write on that? And I would remind that, as you said, she probably can, as long as your 14-year-old granddaughter can understand what's written.
Exactly. I'm sorry. I thought I'd addressed the question, but no. Of course, you can write on your area of expertise, and I think it's important that you do. Obviously. Yeah.
I personally think it is rather very interesting not to have only one-sided topics on nuclear affairs, but also the civil side, where you use it as engineering or in the health system or so on. So we're looking forward to get those essays on those topics.
Jorge, any more questions?
Yes, there's one last question from Ian Fleming Joe. He says, or she says, will the possible areas we should cover in the essay be posted on the website for reference purposes? So will we post all the topics that you listed, Tarek, on the website?
Again, I defer to Peter here.
Yes, we will, but obviously there is a degree of flexibility, as we've just been discussing. So we ask you to focus on the topics that we will post on the website, but certainly there is flexibility. And if you have any concerns, you can consult us individually. You can always reach out and get it.
No further questions that I can see, unless someone else wants to jump in and ask something.
So I'm seeing if our presenters have joined us. They have? Okay, so as I was saying, we have a very distinguished panel of 4 persons who are joining us, who will each speak very briefly. And we will also, or you will also be able to ask them questions. So we have Francesca Giovannini. She is the executive director of the project on managing the atom at the Harvard University Kennedy School's Belfer Center. After her will be Patrick Illinger. He is a senior editor at Süddeutsche Zeitung, a very important newspaper in Germany, and he has a long career as a senior journalist. Then we have Sebastian Brixey Williams. He is co-director of BASIC, which stands for, I think still, British American Security Information Center in London, even though they don't have a New York, Washington office, I think. And then finally, we will also have Angela Kane. She is the former United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. So if Francesca is available, we would like you to come and talk to us, Francesca.
Hi everyone. Hello from Boston, and let me thank first the Conrad Stiftung and Atomic Reporters for putting this event together, but most importantly for launching the essential course. I think you are feeling a really important game, and certainly in the capacity building that we need for the future. Tarek, do you want to introduce myself?
Yes, please. And you're managing the atom, and what does that mean? And how do we manage the atom?
Yes.
And a little bit about yourself, please, as well.
Yes. So let me say to the young people attending this conference today that you guys are way advanced, more advanced than I was at your age. You know, I grew up thinking that I really want to become an international development officer. And I joined the United Nations very early on. And I was first deployed in Gaza, then in Turkey, and then finally in Lebanon. And my very first post, I remember my very first assignment was to attend a meeting among diplomatic missions in Beirut, Lebanon, where everyone was talking about a potential inflow of refugees coming out of Iraq as the United States was preparing to invade Iraq over mysterious weapons of mass destruction. No one had ever explained me what weapons of mass destruction was, nor was yellow cake or uranium mining. So I had no idea what this crisis was about. But what I perceived at that point was it was such an important issue. The countries were going to fight for, and they were ready to destabilize entire regions for it. And all of a sudden, I remember thinking that my knowledge of international development would have never been completed if I didn't understand much clearer the structure of power and how nuclear weapons play in this so-called global order. And so it was really the invasion of Iraq and more, I would say more the consequences that we were expected out of, you know, fighting over these weapons of mass destruction that led me to think that humanitarian and development issues will also greatly benefit from our understanding of what nuclear weapons do to world politics and why do they matter so much for countries, for the international community, and also, quite frankly, for people. And so I decided that I wanted to leave the field of international development, and I ended up winning a scholarship with the Rotary Foundation. And I went to UC Berkeley first and then to Oxford, where I actually retrained myself first in international security. And then I decided really I wanted to take on this nuclear question. And I wanted to understand nuclear weapons and why they were so particular, why they were called weapons of mass destruction. What was the difference between conventional weapons and nuclear weapons? And who regulated these things? And why only 9 countries in the world basically had the destiny of the world in their hand and no one else? And then the story goes that I got then a postdoc at Stanford, where I started studying nuclear non-proliferation much better. And there I have to say, and for some of you this might resonate, I was coming from the humanitarian field. I was coming from political science. I actually didn't know the atoms. I didn't know the science. And I remember one of my mentors said to me, you know, you will never go far in this career unless you really understand the technology. And so they shipped me to San Diego, where I ended up spending 6 weeks with nuclear scientists, learning the technology, learning you know, uranium enrichment, reprocessing, you know, but also the real technology. How do nuclear power plants operate, for example? That really helped me tremendously. And I ended up then getting a job at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, where I led this big initiative called the Global Nuclear Future. And then finally, I went to Vienna for a couple of years with a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty organization. And I'm now at Harvard, where I manage this program. And I want to say just a couple of things about this, which I think is really important. Managing the atom has 2 sides to it. It starts with the idea that nuclear technology, like any other technology, has its great benefits, but also entails enormous risks. So managing the atom doesn't take a position about whether countries need to have nuclear energy for their development. We are pretty agnostic about this. But what we are saying is if a country wants and needs nuclear energy, it has to be done in a responsible way, safely, securely, with very strong safeguards, and making sure that the communities understand also the risks they are taking on. And on the other side of the spectrum, we also work on nuclear weapons. The position again is, I would say, towards certainly nuclear weapons reduction, arms control. We have done some work on nuclear disarmament, but the position of managing the atom is simple, that we need to stabilize these nuclear relations, and we just need to go down in numbers particularly among the nuclear weapons holders. And the focus that we have right now is really to increasing transparency in the relations with the US and China, US and Russia, and Iran in particular. I stop it at that, Tarek.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Francesca. I think that was very useful, and I'm a little bit envious of not being able to join you at Harvard in this managing the atom program. But Francesca also is a co-director of ISODARCO, which is a winter course in northern Italy. And maybe we'll come back to it later on. And I would now like to move on to Patrick Illinger. Patrick, we're looking forward to hearing from you. And if you can tell us what are the challenges in covering nuclear security issues, and how best to inform the public, which is an important role of the media on, as Francesca mentioned, both the benefits and the risks of nuclear technology.
Yeah, thank you, Tarek. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, thank you first for giving me this opportunity. It's a great honor to be in this invited to this venue. And to all the younger people in the audience, the sheer fact that you show up here is telling something very good about you. So thank you for being here, and you'll all have a great future, I'm very sure. So I was asked to say some words from the perspective of a journalist, as opposed to Francesca. I knew about the atom before I knew about journalism, because I did a PhD actually at CERN, which is the big particle accelerator near Geneva. You might have heard about it. So I was actually a scientist before I was a journalist. But when I decided to become a journalist, which actually happened on a science journalism conference at CERN, I got so infected, so I changed my life. And then I went into journalism, very deeply. I did a documentary during the Bosnia War, so I did a lot of journalism to learn about journalism without science, and then I combined the two. So I went back to Munich, Germany, and got the responsibility and the honor to head the science desk of my newspaper, the Süddeutsche Zeitung. For 18 years, I did that. For about a year, I went back into general journalism, and I'm managing the weekend edition now of our paper. So you see, scientists have some opportunity in the general world as well. And there's one thing I tell young journalists or aspiring journalists when younger people think about whether they want to become journalists, and that is, at least at the start of your career, don't be a too general person, a general journalist. Don't come to an editor and say, what do you want me to write about? I'll be able to do it. Because then, as an editor, you don't know you don't find the trust. You don't know what does this person really know about this or that. So the best thing is to actually combine your journalistic wishes and your journalistic tools, which are writing or speaking into a microphone concisely or things like that. But those are tools. Combine them with some content. And content, maybe actually a good trick for the start of your career to find content that most other journalists are not very good at. So you might choose agriculture politics, for example. That's just an example. Or you might choose nuclear issues, which I found out over the years, not too many of my colleagues are really, strong they're not really experts, or they actually have quite funny views about that sometimes. Like I remember a very famous reporter at my paper who covered all over the world, and he went to wars, and he was Africa correspondent and everything. And he went to Fukushima. You remember the accident in 2011. And before he went, he called me and asked me if, when I talk to people over there who were in the area during the accident, do I risk to be infected, like with COVID or something? And as a nuclear scientist, that I had to put the telephone apart and laugh for a second, and then go back to talk to him and explain to him. As if you have some training in nuclear issues, that's just a weird question. So, as Francesca said, if you decide to become more knowledgeable in the nuclear field, you have to do some effort, yes, but the effort is not a PhD, which I only did because that was my life before I was a journalist. You may become a journalist and then interested in the field, and then do something like Francesca did and dive into it by, I don't know, 6-week courses, or just being very interested, reading some things, and get some basic understanding of the atom. And that's where it starts. The atom, actually, it starts below the atom. It's even smaller than the atom. It starts with the nucleus. The atom has a nucleus and electrons around it. So nuclear is nucleus. And understand, for example, what an isotope is, and just the sheer notion of an isotope is something that, I guess, if I walk around in my building and ask all my colleagues what is an isotope, I think the majority wouldn't be able to tell me. But once you have started to become a nuclear expert. And you need to know a few more things like that, like what's half-time, what's decay process, what's exponential decay, and things like that. And as Francesca said, at some point, maybe understand how a nuclear reactor works and things. And then you can move on into, the application of nuclear technology, like maybe civil, like nuclear power plants, or even medical devices, like any MRI, the magnet resonance tomography is a nuclear issue, actually. Or you may go into diplomacy, armament control, and things like that. And it's all just very interesting. I remember the day I learned about the CTBTO, actually from a more scientific view, what they do worldwide. It's just like so interesting. It's even so interesting. I wrote a science thriller last year just for fun on the side. It's not my main job, and it came out in a German publishing house. If it's not against the policy rules, I'd actually like to put the link in. Maybe some German readers are interested. I don't know if I may, or if it's too much of advertising. But why am I telling this? Over the years, I found the whole issue of nuclear science, of subnuclear science, and CTBTO so interesting. I made a thriller out of it, and it's kind of like Jurassic Park in the elementary particle world, actually. So you see, you can have a lot of fun with nuclear issues, but as I said, you need to start with some basic understanding of what the atom is, and you need to understand, for example, that radioactivity is something fundamentally different from poison, a chemical poison, or a biological threat, like SARS-CoV-2 is a biological threat, the virus that has been around us for the last 1.5 years now. So I can promise you it's an utterly interesting field. All aspects of it are interesting. One of the most interesting travels I ever made was visiting Chernobyl, the actual power plant in Ukraine. I thought, having actually written about it for years before I ever went, going there gave me a completely new view of what's going on, of what the problem is, actually. I could go on and on now and tell you what I think about what they did there with the new confinement, the new box they put on the old reactor. I could tell you for hours about it because it's so interesting, So I guess all I can do in my 5 minutes, Tarek is already probably looking at his watch, is promise you it's a very interesting field. All aspects of it have some thrilling part, and just keep up being interested. And if you have any questions, please feel free. I'm very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. That was very interesting to hear of your transition from a nuclear scientist to a nuclear journalist, and all your experience. Also reminds me, I led a Canadian delegation to Chernobyl, and we went into the control room, which was shared between the destroyed reactor and the still operating reactor. Anyway, it's another story. Given the time, I was wondering whether Angela Kane is with us, Jorge?
I do not see her yet on the list. I can look, but
Okay.
Sebastian is here with us.
Sebastian is here, yeah, but I was just looking at the time slot, but if she's not here, Sebastian Williams of BASIC, so let's travel virtually to London. Sebastian.
Thanks, Tariq. And
tell us please what BASIC is, and does it still stand for British American Security Information Center, and what it is that you do, and whatever else you would like to tell us.
Well, you're close. It's British American Security Information Council, although we tend not to use the long title very much these days because it is a bit of a mouthful. Hi, everybody. My name is Sebastian Williams. I'm a nuclear weapons policy expert and conflict mediator, and I'm the co-director of BASIC. We're a think tank in London that promotes meaningful dialogue to build international trust, reduce nuclear risks, and advance disarmament. First, may I say thank you so much to the Conrad Stiftung and to Atomic Reporters for inviting me to speak today and for starting this fantastic initiative. My day-to-day focus at BASIC is around trying to stimulate and support a global conversation about responsibilities in relation to nuclear weapons as an approach to reduce distrust and nuclear risks. And my particular focus here is on nuclear conflict in South Asia. But I'm also passionately interested in widening public inclusion and engagement in nuclear weapons policy. And I've worked for a number of years on increasing cognitive and demographic diversity in the field, most recently as the lead founder of BASIC's Emerging Voices Network. My co-director Marion and I are also both relatively young directors in a 3.5-decade-old organization in a field that is famously known for being rather male, grey-haired, and often conservative in its thinking. And which we think is ripe for systemic transformation. So I've been asked to say a few words to you this afternoon about how I got involved in nuclear policy and why I think it's incredibly worthwhile and important and deserves your attention, at least just as much as other existential challenges such as the climate crisis. So first, how I kind of got into nuclear policy. I've been awed by nuclear weapons as far back as I can remember, and I can recall a number of moments where they featured in my childhood. And the defining moment for me was really reading, as an 8-year-old boy at school, a satirical graphic novel published for adults in the UK in the 1980s called When the Wind Blows. And it's quite a powerful story about an old couple who die slowly of the effects of radioactive fallout while never fully comprehending the situation that they're in. And clearly a teacher had thought it was a children's book because it had pictures and they made it available to the kids in my year. And that book had a really important effect on me, as did other cultural products such as films like Threads. My professional break into nuclear weapons policy happened during my master's degree at SAS in London, where I worked with Dr. Dan Flesch on his project Scrap Weapons. And that project was partly designed to create a vehicle for students to develop their knowledge of the area. With the small knowledge I gained there, I was then invited to speak at a panel organized by SOAS at the United Nations and to attend a preparatory meeting of the Nuclear Ban Treaty negotiations in Geneva. And in parallel that year, I became a member of a professional and academic network in the UK called Student Young Pugwash, who provided me a platform to present a paper on emerging technologies in nuclear weapons. And in the audience was a member of BASIC staff who invited me to apply for the internship program. And I was lucky enough to progress to a full-time role, and I've been at BASIC ever since. In this competitive field, I don't list my CV to boast, but I have no doubt that those extracurricular activities and those opportunities for learning and training, and also to echo Patrick, actually, that the fact that I picked something to go deep on amongst a much wider set of interests were what set me apart from other candidates for those positions. And it was by first getting my foot in the door that I feel I've been able to progress to my position today. So if you're considering a career in nuclear policy, I couldn't recommend more highly taking part in the course we're launching today, and also applying to join networks such as the CTBTO Youth Group, a global network for younger people aiming to prevent nuclear testing, and BASIC's Emerging Voices Network, which seeks to provide a truly diverse network of younger people with a particular focus on including people from the Global South to influence key nuclear forums such as the NPT and the TPNW. It was only much later in life that I realized that not all children had come across nuclear weapons in their youth like I had. For most people, they're completely off their radar, even as adults. And most people didn't seem to have the kind of instinctive fascination and fear that I had, and many colleagues I've spoken to in the field have expressed a similar sentiment. Now, it's common for experts in most fields of research to find it strange that other people don't find their work as interesting as they do. But with nuclear weapons, whose threat to life and health hangs over everybody every day, I've always found it odd that there isn't more of a general interest. After all, we seem to care passionately about the climate crisis, which is just another long-term existential threat that requires bottom-up politics and multilateral action to resolve. And I think much of this can be explained by a negative feedback loop. The public has lost interest in nuclear threats, meaning that politicians don't act on them, meaning that there's little for journalists to report on. And when they do, editors often don't accept the pieces anyway. Why? Because the public has lost interest, and so it goes on. And the longer this goes on, the less expertise there is, and the harder it will be to change. So we've got to break that negative feedback loop at all of its stages. And in my view, it's essential that a new generation of journalists become experts in and cover nuclear weapons policy and lobby their editors to bring these issues to the public. And we should be inspired that a similar kind of reversal has recently occurred in climate policy, which has suddenly turned into a powerful positive feedback loop of activism, reporting, and political action. We need the same to happen for nuclear weapons. But to avoid this happening again, nuclear weapons journalism needs to evolve. The media should feel more emboldened to break out of the silos of defense reporting and link nuclear weapons to the things that the public really care about. For instance, nuclear weapons and the climate crisis are intrinsically linked because the choice to spend money on nuclear weapons for national security is done directly at the expense of planetary security. And there are a myriad opportunities to frame reporting about nuclear weapons in terms of a broader system change narrative. So just as the Green New Deal is demonstrating that an alternative to neoliberal economics and planetary exploitation is achievable, so we need to consider how we can institute systems change in security, away from one based on threat to one based on dialogue. Yet, all of this has to start with a proper understanding of nuclear issues at the strategic, political, and technological levels. And so courses like this one, launched by CAS and Atomic Reporters, offers an opportunity to train this new generation of thinkers and writers. So I would like to recommend that you make nuclear weapons a part of your expertise portfolio, whether you want to become a journalist, a think tanker, an academic, a filmmaker, a writer, or whatever it is, and become one of the relatively small number of people who can claim a trustworthy understanding of this area of knowledge. Because it's a forgotten global issue, and I think its time has come for a resurgence in public political activity and for a new narrative. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. That was really a very motivating account that you gave, and I'm glad you pointed out in your talk this element of choice between nuclear weapons and other investments. And it's sort of interesting that in these times of the COVID pandemic, the largest number of deaths and casualties have taken place in two countries that have nuclear weapons, that's United States and India. So may I now move on to Angela Kane, former United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. Angela.
Thank you very much, Tariq, and hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you here. And I think that when you read about nuclear weapons, nuclear issues, it's always framed in a very negative way. It's a very scary way. It talks about Iran, it talks about North Korea. I mean, essentially rogue nations that could really unleash a Mageddon on the rest of the world and obliterate actually many of us. And when I grew up in post-war Germany, which obviously, as you can tell, is a long time ago, we had to practice how to survive a nuclear attack. And we were told we had to dive under our wooden benches and that would protect us. And we had to kind of cower, underneath them. And I would recommend that you Google it at some point. When you Google duck and cover, you find US promotional movies that were actually, I see some of you is already laughing. Some of yours, and it's like, it's Bertie the turtle, and Bertie the turtle kind of pulls in his neck and, he protects himself against a nuclear attack. I mean, now you think it absolutely is ridiculous, but on the other hand, it was very, very serious at the time because people thought really this nuclear attack could actually become a reality. But when you look at it in terms of the scariness of all of this, and then I look at the introduction and the questions, the 5 questions that have been posed about, what are you interested in? And the 5 questions inevitably are very, very positive. I mean, meeting international organizations, making new friends from around the world. There's nothing scary about that at all. And I think that what it does is it basically promises to add something to your life, it adds something to your activities. And so that is really something that one should focus on. Let me just share with you how I ended up in disarmament and non-proliferation at the United Nations. And many people think this is like premeditated and you were planning it. Well, in my case, it really wasn't. I was working in the office of the Secretary General, and that basically meant that I was filtering whatever came back from the department in the UN to the Secretary General, and I had to make sure that it was all correct and it was all, well positioned and it was all politically fine, which was actually a large obligation and it was a large responsibility. But I got interested in it. And so I went and worked in development for a couple of years and then was offered a post in disarmament and non-proliferation. And I thought that was just great. And I took it and I worked in it for 4 years and then left it again for a number of years and then came back. And that was my last job at the UN as High Representative for Disarmament, which was really, really fascinating. And again, Sebastian already mentioned that it's like, I think the gray hair male domain, I think you mentioned it, there aren't that many women around. So if you go into it as a woman, let me tell you, you really stand out. So that's another advantage I find for women who are aspiring to go into this field. But on the other hand, it's also changing because there are a number of very effective, very good women who are becoming very prominent in the field. And that is also something that I would find very, very positive because it really is changing. And it's not only changing in terms of embassies and government delegates, but it's also changing in terms of having the very active NGO community. The non-governmental community is very much, I don't want to say dominated by women, but they're very, very in very, very important organizations that are headed by women. And I think that became very well known in 2017 when ICANN received the Nobel Peace Prize. And you basically had the head, Beatrice Finn, who was the head of the NGO. She had invited one of the Hibakshas from Japan, a survivor of the nuclear attack in 1945. And so that really kind of showcased the whole issue of women as well. But my advice is basically, you may feel a little bit reluctant. And I think, again, Sebastian, who I just listened to, also talked about, it isn't covered very much in the press. And if it is covered, it is not always in a very positive way. So you might sort of be reluctant to go into the field. And so my advice is really look into the issues. Start with something that's accessible. And I'm giving you one example, which is not in the nuclear field, but I do think it's important to sort of somehow engage. Princess Diana's 60th birthday was going to be commemorated or is being commemorated around the world. And what do people focus on as one of her big achievements is always working for the mine ban treaty, basically putting the focus on eliminating mines. And that is something that I find really, really meaningful. It shows you what one individual can do to focus on one issue and to really blow it up in people's mind and make it a reality that is really important to look at and to actually work for. Now, none of us is Princess Diana. None of us has the outreach and the famous look that she has. But on the other hand, I think it is really true that any one of us can make a difference. And that's really important. Now, what can you engage in? What can you engage in? For example, you have there's an activity that is called Cities and Nuclear Weapons, and it was today it was on Twitter that there were 2 young people were honored for basically engaging at the local level in their city, which is Winnipeg, and in their local city they were pushing the politicians to basically say, I want you to join this. Cities and nuclear weapons, meaning no nuclear weapons in our cities. And that is a movement that is going stronger and stronger. So again, you can make a difference. And I think that that's really exciting if you can. And you can join other initiatives. Sebastian just mentioned the Young Pugwash group, for example. He mentioned Basics Emerging Voices. There are more. There's the CTBTO youth group. You don't have to know anything about the issues when you join, but basically you have over 1,000 people, young people who have already joined this organization and this international network. Now, some, of course, have left because they say, oh, it's not exactly what I wanted. But others have been totally engaged in these issues and have actually pursued a career in this, have been offered positions in NGOs or other organizations, but what happens is that everyone gains a better understanding of the issues, as well as make friends, which is also one of the questions that was asked here around the world. And you have also, if you're engaged already and you're already somewhat knowledgeable in the nuclear issues, you have the Young Deep Cuts Commission, for example. You can become a youth member of the Office for Disarmament Affairs, the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs. And there are more and more young people who are joining these works. And one of the very active ones is one where I mentioned already, Beatrice Finn, is ICAN. That's the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons. That's really gotten so much traction because the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, is now in force. It will have its first meeting of states parties early next year. And so there's a lot of engagement around this issue. Really, really important. It has chapters in so many countries. And frankly, I look at the people who are working in it, and it's all young people. There's a tremendous, tremendous energy. And it has a great social media feed. I often have to smile when I see their Twitter. It's original, sometimes it's funny, but it's always has a serious intent behind it, which of course is the whole game. And that is another benefit of joining, one of these groups, to just kind of get exposed to the issues. But you also get to use not only the skills you already have, but also you probably end up learning a lot more. You can write, you can organize, you can fundraise, you can advocate, you can make public statements. There's no end to the useful things that actually expose you, in addition to the substantive knowledge that you're really gaining. So that's basically how I would see in entering the field. And I hope that many of you, if not all of you, will do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that very positive message. I had long seen international bureaucrats when I was working in the field, and I was so pleased when you became the High Representative, because you were so active and outspoken on many of these issues, rather than a bump on the log, which I would mention at the IAEA when I first came here. Somebody just sitting there and not saying anything because they were so afraid to say anything. I'm glad you mentioned all these groups, and there are also Global Zero, there's Pugwash in many countries, Mayors for Peace. So as Angela mentioned, there's no shortage of different venues for interested young people to join, and we really need a generational change. As Sebastian mentioned, a lot of them are very male, a lot of them are very older people, so we welcome younger involvement. Since Angela is with us only for a short time, if there are any questions for her, we would like to take them now. Jorge, if you could just monitor that, and then we will come back to our three other earlier presenters. So any questions for Angela?
So far, there are no questions in the chat, but if you want to type them, I'll keep a look. And also you can raise your hand and ask verbally with your microphone if you would like to.
So Angela, while we are waiting, there is I think today or tomorrow, a meeting in Madrid of this Stockholm initiative of 16 countries that are promoting stepping stones for nuclear disarmament, in which BASIC was also involved. So I was wondering what your views might be on these stepping stones to disarmament from the Stockholm initiative.
Well, I think what is really important about it is that it exists, meaning that this group was created, that it made a positive statement, that it made a positive step of sort of saying, we want to do something to get out of the stalemate. We want to have a dialogue. We need to talk to each other. And it's really, really important not to just kind of glare and glower at each other like how wrong we are if you want to abolish nuclear weapons, and how right we are if we want to have them as deterrents. So that is something that I find extremely important. There are a number of steps that are coming out. It is as you said, 16 countries. It is a coalition, or it is a grouping of states that also have very different opinions. We're not there yet, but on the other hand, there is a great willingness to actually move things in one direction. I also find it's positive, and I don't want to say that it is due to the Stockholm Initiative, but it is due also to the fact that there is a foreign ministers meeting. It's a very high level. It's not at a bureaucratic level, but it is actually at the highest political level. when you had the meeting, for example, with Biden, President Biden and Putin, you had something coming out that is building on more. And now is where's, President Macron, for example, where's the UK, are they signing on to the statement that was the Reagan-Gorbachev statement, not in the same words, but in a similar sentiment? What can we actually do about the nuclear war? Can never be won and should never be fought. So there are things that are building on top of that I believe are very positive. And we do need a positive incentive to actually go forward. We have the NPT review conference. I think it's still up in the air whether it's now going to be, I think it's no longer going to be in August. Now January is a problem. Now there's some December dates coming around. I don't know where it's ending up. But on the other hand, we will have this conference at some point and probably not in the very distant future. So we need to have a positive impetus that pushes it forward. And I think it is extremely productive to basically have a high-level political meeting now, because it sets the signal and sets the tone to say, you nuclear weapon states need to do something. This is not going to be the status quo. You can't hide behind the possession of nuclear weapons forever. So I believe this is really very good. And there might also be movement forward. I think there's a lot of issues already under discussion within NATO, because that is also linked up with the entire nuclear discussion. So, if you are interested in politics, and that means, again, you younger generation, this is something you can't get away from. It is an extremely important issue. And so I think it behooves everyone to actually understand the basics of it and how it influences and how it shapes the public discourse, but also particularly the political discourse.
Thank you, Angela. How much more time do you have with us?
I'm sorry, I'm getting on a plane.
Okay.
Very early tomorrow morning. So I did this because you're all good friends of mine. And so, I agreed.
Well,
but maybe just
you.
Another 5 minutes if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
So I think Francesca had a quick comment. And after that, maybe if you wanted to say a few words about the Secretary General Guterres's plan for arms control and disarmament. Francesca, do you have a quick comment for Angela?
No, Tarek, let Angela comment, and then I'll share my comment later.
Okay. So, Jorge, are there any questions for Angela? If not, then Angela, maybe you, in your final words, you could tell us what the UN is doing and your former department, and then we wish you a safe flight tomorrow.
Thank you, Tariq. The Secretary General launched this disarmament, basically, agenda that he launched, I think it was 2.5 years ago, and he published it. But on the other hand, one of the difficult issues for the UN is always that the UN cannot actually take the action. It has to encourage, it has to propose, it has to activate or advocate for member states to take the action. So there's very little that can be done. I believe, and you said that already, that I was always very frank, I believe you really have to be more frank in terms of also telling member states what they need to do. So you have to be very, let's say, a little nudging and kind of pushing them to take the right action. Doesn't make you always very popular, because invariably it means that you're running up against opinions, either from one side or the other side, or maybe from all sides. But on the other hand, I think that is really the obligation that an international civil servant who doesn't have an allegiance to either one or the other side really needs to do. What Guterres has done, he has linked it basically to the Sustainable Development Goals as well. He has more recently, much stronger than he did in his disarmament agenda, he's come out very strongly against lethal autonomous weapon systems, for example, and he's also become stronger on the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue was not that strong, in my opinion, in the disarmament agenda, to be honest with you. But what the department was doing, what the Disarmament Affairs Department was doing, to basically find champions, country champions. So let's say if you're a country, then you are supposed to take on a certain issue, and then you're trying to get more states to support you, and then you're championing it. I am not quite sure that has worked that well. I think the jury is still out on that. It's been around for quite a while, and there are some champions, but what is missing to my mind is you have to have any attempt to make improvement, in my opinion, has to have milestones, and it has to have monitoring. And only once you say you have reached certain milestones, this is what you've actually done, this is what you have achieved, then you can claim that you have actually made progress. And there, I don't really see very much of it yet. And that I find very regrettable. So there has to be another push to actually have the milestones, this, with dates, if we can do that, and then basically to sort of say, what have we actually done? What are we monitoring progress? You have to demand progress. And that is, in my opinion, lacking.
Thank you very much, Angela. We wish you all the best, and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
So,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye. So if we now come back to our three earlier presenters, Francesca, Patrick, and Sebastian, if there are any questions, Jorge will help me in putting them up. But already a number of issues have come up: the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and so on. Francesca, you had earlier wanted to take the floor, so here's your opportunity.
Thank you. I just wanted to mostly speak to the young people who are on the phone today. I teach at the Fletcher School, and I teach a class on nuclear weapons. And often, these issues really sound quite obsolete, like quite old, right? I mean, the energy is not on the nuclear debate. The energy is elsewhere today. At least in the United States, the energy, the momentum is about racial, justice. It's about environmental justice. It's about reducing inequality. And I think what the nuclear community needs to do, and we continue to fail this, is to stop talking among ourselves and connect also with the energy that is out there. Is making clear that the topics we are dealing with are not separated from the topics of racial justice. And I give you an example. So new topics that, for example, at Harvard we are working on right now. So we've been thinking a lot in the time of Black Lives Matter, George Floyd death. What does the nuclear community have to say about these issues? And so we started actually really exploring how do these social issues connect with the nuclear debate. We found out something very interesting, and there is a racial aspect that is very clear when it comes to the nuclear ecosystem. First, most of the uranium mining happens in indigenous communities with catastrophic environmental and health consequences for the people that live there in their communities with no compensation cost. And there is a racial aspect to it because, as you know, some have argued that nuclear weapons, the atomic bomb, is a white bomb. And there is very little been written about the African-American role in nuclear disarmament and pacifism in the United States. And I could continue on. So I think it seems to me that your challenge, guys, and your major contribution is to understand how we can expand that debate so that we understand nuclear weapons in much bigger debates of justice, of climate change. So there is a big momentum here at Harvard, of course, to study the role of nuclear energy in the climate change debate. And I don't think we can approach this in a simplistic way. It's not a yes or no answer, right? It is really understanding what sustainability means. What are the risks that communities take? We have interviewed the CEO of TerraPower, of the Bill Gates company. And of course, it's very easy to promote nuclear energy for development. But these are not the right questions we need to ask. Is what are the risks that a society is willing to take in order to achieve a specific type of development? And who bears the cost and the risk of this? So go deep into these questions. It's not about nuclear weapons. It is about an ecosystem that engages and interface really important questions. Your job is to find those stories, and stories that, in my view, my generation, the previous one, just refused, because the nuclear community is very insular. We talk with one another. Tarek, you know this much better than me. We all talk to each other about nuclear weapons, but we never ask how do they actually connect with the broader picture. I think these are the stories that need to come out.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Francesca, because a lot of the nuclear weapons testing took place on indigenous lands in Algeria, in the Marshall Islands, in Australia, in the United States, and elsewhere. And also you raised this very important issue of where uranium is mined. In Niger and elsewhere, again, you have very poor people who are not really getting the benefits and also bearing the radiological consequences on their health. Jorge, were there any questions coming up?
Yes, there is one. Oh, sorry.
And also if Sebastian or Patrick would like to add, why don't you put up the question and then I'll go to Sebastian and Patrick.
Sure, there's one question for Francesca. It says, what kind of strategy would you recommend if I'm very interested in this topic, but I know very little about it?
So Francesca, can you just give a very short reply to that, and then we'll come back to you because we are pushed for time at the moment.
You email me or you email Tarek, and you jump on board and you come in January to Isodarko, where you're going to have 1 week of immersed training in this topic, and this will be the beginning of your nuclear career.
Good.
Email me.
Yeah, is ISODARCO.
I'll put my email on the chat, guys.
Okay, thanks. So can we go to Sebastian and then Patrick? So this can also be your concluding comments because we are coming close to our end of time. Sebastian?
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
I want to start by saying I really love everything I've heard, but particularly what Francesca was just saying about the need to connect outside of the silo, no pun intended, that the nuclear field finds itself in. It is so important, and you're absolutely right. We just haven't quite worked that out yet. I would also recommend Isodarko incredibly highly to you. It is so much fun and incredibly enlightening at the same time. So do apply. I think there's just a huge amount of potential to think about redefining security. It's one of these terms that it's so central to everything we do that we don't even really think to question what it means. And for a lot of people who work in the space I work in, which is much more on the military weapons side of nuclear, there's a lot of received understandings of this word. And, I come at this, I'm an English student by training. I'm previously a visual communications student. So I'm very interested in communication. I'm interested in how words are used and how power is constructed through words. And my interest in international security really came through an interest in human rights. And I got more involved in human rights and human rights fictions while I was doing my English degree. So I bring, I think, a very skeptical stance towards any word. I want to open them up and tinker with them and pick them apart, which I don't think is true across my field. I suspect others would agree. There's a lot of received understandings, and there's a great paper from Benoit Pelopidas at Sciences Po from a couple of years ago. I have to say I can't quite remember the title, but he does a very interesting analysis of other words that have that do a similar thing. So the word like deterrence or proliferation, which aren't really questioned. We take them as sort of assumptions, and then we append onto them prefixes or suffixes like non-proliferation, counter-proliferation. But actually, we don't sort of question the fundamental terms. And when people say security, what they tend to mean, for the most part, in kind of military circles, is the security and survival of the state. And they don't think so much about the human, and they certainly don't think a lot about environment or about animal life, for example. And I think if we're going to get through the next century, we need to completely upend that. We need to think about security in a much more integrative way. We need to recognize that our international security is in part founded on our national security, which is founded on our human security, and all of that security is then founded on the security of the planet, the natural processes, the water cycle, and the biosphere. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the drastic loss in biodiversity that we're all facing. And if we can't solve that, then inevitably all of the human constructed ideas of security are going to collapse. So we need to be willing, I think, to say this when we talk about nuclear weapons, and not operate only within the constraints of the traditional hard security conversation, because otherwise we're going to keep repeating the same mistakes of the past. The final thing I want to say is I don't speak German, but I wish I did, because I think that Patrick's book with Jurassic Park at the elementary particle level sounds fantastic fun, and maybe I'll have to learn German so that I can read it. But thank you everybody for coming and listening, and good luck with it.
thank you, Sebastian, and also together with Francesca for broadening this discussion then from just bombs and missiles. Patrick, the last word is yours from the presenter side.
No, I think time is up, Tarek. So that's fine. I agree with everything that's been said, and the remarks were very fundamental. So I can not add something on an even more philosophical level. There's no way. Just when Francesca was presenting, this one thing came to my mind was the inequality and how we deal or the white world deals with other countries, or richer countries deal with poorer countries. And there is an example that wouldn't come to everybody's mind, which is the new Chernobyl confinement, in my view. Because what has been done, and I may say this as a journalist probably more bluntly than some people involved, the Europe and more countries have paid 2 billion euros to build a new confinement, but it's actually a robot. The whole thing is a machine, and it's an extremely complicated machine. And it reminds me of a bad development policy. You give an incredibly sophisticated machine to a country who doesn't have the means to actually deal with it, and it's supposed to run for 100 years. And in my view, that's just a very bad way to cope with the problem in Chernobyl. And that's just one example of things that have been covered too little, also in journalism, but also probably in the science or in the academic world. Is it actually a good way how we the European or Western Europe dealt with this problem in Chernobyl? So this was just one example for the younger audience to give you ideas on where to find topics for essays. You might just look at some issue and a little deeper, and you might quite quickly find a story behind the first image, behind the first impression of what it looks like. You might find some story quite quickly behind it, and it doesn't always have to be the big nuclear weapon world or something. It might be one topic, one specific, very or more easily graspable issue, probably. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me and listening.
So, Patrick, if I could, given your expertise, ask you a question. So you don't need to get into the party politics part of it, but how do you think the issue of nuclear was dealt with in Germany about the closure of the Hanau plant and Germany moving out of nuclear power? So on the issue in terms of public information rather than the positions of political leaders or parties. So do you think the public was well informed or not well informed? And did you think the German press played a responsible role or not a responsible role as a journalist?
Well, there's no way I will do general bashing of press coverage or something. But what happens with the nuclear issue is something that happens not only in Germany. It is perceived very much by the sheer fear of an accident happening. Right, like when Fukushima happened, everybody saw an exploding reactor, which is a very bad thing, no doubt. But that drove actually also Angela Merkel, I think, to change her views on how we should deal with nuclear issues. Having said this, sometimes good decisions, can be made for the wrong reasons, right? And if you think about nuclear technology, my personal view is that probably takes more time, but my view is that we should not only focus on the possibility of an accident happening, which I think if a reactor is well maintained and things is actually very small. It's actually very small, but also on a global level, and I'm talking about waste is one thing, of course, waste that will stay there for 10,000, 100,000 years or more. And the other thing is the proliferation issue. One thing you need to understand, probably everybody knows, but a country that has a civil use of nuclear power can switch to military use within very short time. And it's very hard to like we see in Iran to have surveillance in place and to really know what's going on and whether a country is actually changing this. So I personally, I'm not much, I believe in renewables and things like that. So to make it very, very easy, even having studied all this. But as I said, in this case, I think fear drove the decision, which does not necessarily say, in a general sense, it was a bad decision in the end. So that's my baseline on this, I think.
Thank you. So we've come to the end of our time, and I will just now pass on to Peter and to Claudia. But I also wanted to sort of, from my experience, I'm a little bit concerned that in the media, the discussion on nuclear sometimes tends to be over-securitized on the non-proliferation and nuclear weapon side, and also sometimes on the nuclear security side. So I think the atom has helped save many more lives than the atom has been used to kill people. So it's an interesting balance, and I think this is the challenge for the young generation in informing the public on these aspects. And of course, everyone has their own personal beliefs, so nobody's asking them to compromise them, but to have an informed discussion and to have the responsibility of informing the public, and through the public also policymakers and decision makers. So thank you very much for everyone for this part, particularly the presenters. And now back to Peter and to Claudia for winding up. Thank you.
I will just say a few very, very quick words before I pass this over to Claudia, who really has been instrumental in making this project run. What we hope you will get out of this are the seeds of a conversation that is not being held. And we think that's the most important thing. As Tarek just said, whatever your personal views are, we're not that interested. But this is an incredibly important subject that is neglected, poorly understood, and it's something that in a democracy, well, never mind, not a democracy, we should all be concerned about because it affects all our lives. That's what I have to say. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. And Claudia, thank you for this opportunity.
On my side, also very few words. First of all, we really would like you to send us your ideas, your essays, and please talk about it to others. Everybody can join this competition, even if it was not part of this event. So the time is over in the end of August. Till then, everybody can send us an essay. Please talk about it. Secondly, a big thank to our speakers. I find your remarks very inspiring, and you really touched on very important topics and issues, which encouraged us for this series, for this study program, because this is exactly what we want to achieve, that you get in dialogue, that you make networking, that you get out of a close community, that you learn more things, and that we lose the complacence and carelessness from what Sebastian was talking about. This is, for me, really astonishing to see this carelessness, and it's important to know more and better about this topic. And the last word goes to thank the cooperation partners, the Atomic Reporters, for all your efforts, for giving us so much ideas and support, because you are the ones who bring the contents in this project. And I just want to thank all of the colleagues with Atomic Reporters, and also my own team, especially Brigitte Grech, for organizing so many things. So thanks for joining us today. And now we close this session, which is publicly seen, and who wants to stay with us after the official session is over can stay, please. Thank you all, and wish you a very good week.